All right, hi everyone. I'm just recording this session, hoping to show some techniques in terms of creating a responsive site. I have a desktop layout and a mobile layout. And my suggestion with these sorts of things is to see where things are moving to, and break the page down as well into identifiable sections. So this is clearly a header section here. That's my nav, and this is some sort of account details section here. Sometimes I see students making this account and checkout part of their main nav, or they create a second nav. If you look at the documentation on MDN, they really do want the nav to just be for main navigation rather than kind of secondary navigation. You can set different types of navigation. So for example, if you have on-page navigation, say like linking to an ID on the page, then you just need to define the different types of navigation, and you can do that. And I'll share a link about that on, actually I can search MDN nav. This is a highly useful resource to always be on. And here, okay, so it gives us usage notes, which is always useful to know. A document may have several nav elements, for example, one for site navigation and one for intra-page navigation. And then they recommend the using a label for accessibility. So I would definitely take a look at that. I'll share that in the chat. That's just a side note there. If you're unsure about what tag to use, how to use it, MDN's the place to go. Okay, so I'll probably have this as some sort of section element here, but I can see that on mobile it wraps below this header element. Oh yeah, my timing is 1 hour because I'm in the UK, so I'm 1 hour ahead of you guys, coming to you from the past. All right, so then I have this kind of intro section. Technically, this could be a header. You might want to make that a header of the main. So this would be my main section, I would say. You could have this as a header or a section. I would say that either is acceptable here. And then I'd have this as another distinct section of my page. And then with this sort of layout, you have two options really. You can either go for CSS grids, or you can use Flexbox. Both will work fine for our purpose. And you can see that they wrap to a single column over here. All right, so let's start building. So here I've already got my images in a folder. I'm just going to create an index.html file here. I'm going to go right from the beginning of making this whole thing. So I hope that that's what's wanted, and hopefully there's some value in that. I can jump in halfway on this, but I think it probably makes sense to do the whole thing. So I'm going to say here, set the title to Smoothies homepage. And then I'm going to create my two sections, the two kind of large sections of my page. So there's a header. Let's call it header for now. And a main. Just added some text so we can see it. Let me open this. All right. But now I'm going to just add the other content that I have here. So I have this logo. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll add, I'm going to create a div here. I guess I could make it a section, but I'm just going to make it a div. I'll give it a class of logo container. I think that makes sense. Add my image. Always add alt text for your HTML images. And I'm going to say Smoothies logo. And the Smoothies text. And I'm going to add just an anchor tag around there. Always a good idea to link to the home page on your logo. And close that anchor tag. Close the anchor tag. Yeah, just close the anchor tag. It's closing there. So now I've got an extra closing div. Okay. So I've got that added to my page, and I just want to add the nav, and then I want to add my additional section there. So let's go to the HTML here. I then have a nav. And inside of my nav, I just want to double check which links I've got. This is annoying. And it goes to, I'm just going to use dummy links for now. Home. About and contact. Now, there might be some questions about that I haven't used a UL and LI here, and I'm making it specifically like this to highlight the fact that there is some debate about whether you need to use UL and LI elements inside of your nav. Generally, the prevailing view, and probably a traditional view, is that this is a list of links. And so you should use a UL and an LI and then override it. But there's increasingly debate about whether that's actually needed. And you'll often now find people just putting the link straight into the nav like that. I accept both, and I think that's fine. The traditional way would be though with the UL-LI. But I can understand why people don't want to have to faff with switching off a whole bunch of styling for a UL and LI. So something to bear in mind. Okay, so we've got now that. Now we need to add a section, and I'll have that be a class of, I'm going to say, account details. And then there's two links in there. Accounts. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the file paths for now. So let's say account. And copy that and have checkout. Okay, if we have a look at our page, it doesn't look great, but we'll get onto styling it shortly. The important thing is that we're writing our HTML to be as clear and free from concern about the layout as possible, right? We're grouping these things together logically. Then next, I'm going to work on my main, where I have this H1. And it says, welcome to Smoothies. Then it has a paragraph. Some lorem ipsum there. And then there's a link. Just a note on this. So if you have an element like this view our products, I sometimes see students place view our products in a button. It looks like a button, sure, but this is actually just a link, and you style it to look however you want it to look like. So just make sure that if its primary purpose is moving the user to a different page, that you use an anchor tag for that. A button is used for adding on-page JavaScript interactivity. So for example, if you want to add to cart or something like that. And so the user clicks add to cart, and then suddenly the cart drops down from the top right of the page. They don't go to a cart page. They don't go to cart.html. They stay on the page they're on, but it changes something on the page. Then that's what you want to use a button for. The other place you'd use a button for is in a form, if you want to use a button element instead of a input type equals button. Right. And then I'm going to say view our products. And then below that is the featured images. So actually probably makes sense to group this as one single section. So I'm going to do that. And inside of this other section, I'm going to have an H2 that says featured products. There's a question in the chat. So is it wrong to use button when it comes to semantics? So if I go and put button like that inside of my anchor tag, that's incorrect. It's incorrect, one, because I'm adding an element purely because I want certain styling, right? So if I specifically want to have kind of this kind of background and hover effect, but I can add all of that with CSS. So I don't need a button element here. But also if I had to run this through a validator, it would complain that I've placed a button inside of an anchor tag. It doesn't want that button there. The button is really just there so that you can attach JavaScript to like an event, like a JavaScript event to something, like so that the user clicks something and it changes something on the page. So if they, if there's no element to hang an event on, then you can use the button for that. There's a second question here. MJ, it's okay if I use a container in each section to keep things inside at a certain width. I see that most of the lessons don't say anything about that. What you can do, I would question whether you can have a container, like a single container, in order to keep your widths. So for example, here, let me zoom out a bit. I have the body is full width here, but my main section, I'm going to place a single width on my main to contain these two sections. So these two sections are going to sit inside of a main which has been contained with its width. So hopefully that helps with that question there. All right, let's move on. Okay, so keep the questions coming. I'm happy to answer them, and hopefully I'll spot all of them. But I'm keeping an eye out on my chat here. Yeah, so there's a follow-up. Yes, I might have a different layout on other pages. Like you say, that means that on another page, I need another div for the main. Well, you can apply a class here. So I could have class equals home. And then for the main that's on the home, I can have specific styling. But on another page, I just have the generic main styling that doesn't have this class of home, for example. All right, so I'm going to move on and I'm going to add my featured products. Probably the easiest solution here is to have a div class of featured products. And inside of that, I'm going to have 6 divs. They'll have an H3 each. It says green smoothie. I'll add a paragraph here. It says I know, something like that. And then I also have an image, so I'm going to add that as well. So images, smoothie.jpg equals smoothie. Okay. And then I need 6 of these, so I'll just duplicate that. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hit save. All right. And so now my page content is there. Obviously, the styling now needs to be dealt with. And so I'm going to go and create a folder called CSS. Inside of that, I'll have styles CSS. And the first thing I'd like to do is I'm going to get my fonts. So I got my fonts from Google Fonts. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts. And I'm going to search for, I had Lobster. So I'm going to select that style, and you can see it now opens this window on the right here. But I can go back and search for another font, and it's called Sin. That one. Okay, and I'm just going to grab, let me just make this forward so I can see. So now I've added that one, and you can see it creates one style sheet for me here. Sometimes I see students adding multiple style sheets to load fonts onto their page. And this just means that the browser is having to keep making requests to go and fetch a style sheet. So the less requests your browser can be making, the better. So I'm going to copy that. And I'm going to add that to my head. Nothing has happened. Nothing gets styled yet because I haven't actually linked to my style sheet. So I'm going to add a link to my style sheet. Still nothing has been styled because adding the font to the browser is only one step. And now I can go here and I'll say on my body that I want the font family. So you want to choose whatever generic font you want all your text to be. So generally this will be things like paragraphs, maybe small headings. Always set a font on the body element would be my advice. Times New Roman doesn't look very good. It looks old school. It's been used since long time ago. So try and find unique fonts for your sites and try and avoid any of them defaulting to Times New Roman would be my advice. Cool. So the name of the font here. And I can save that. And now you can see that that font is being applied onto my page. It's always, however, a good idea to add backup fonts in case this font fails. So maybe I'm going to add, say, Arial. It gives me a font stack there that I can use. So now if something happens, say, for example, Google has used a Facebook server and their fonts all go down, and for some reason this font doesn't get loaded, maybe there's a typo in here, something like that, at least the user will get Arial, and if their browser doesn't have Arial, they'll get Helvetica, and if they don't have Helvetica, they'll get whatever the generic sans serif is for this page. Okay. Then I have another font, which is my Lobster font. So I want to apply that to the H1. And we can say font family, and it's Lobster. I don't really need the quotations if it's a single word, but just generally better if you're loading the fonts from another place, you'll usually use quotation marks, but you don't have to. The quotation marks are, however, important if there are spaces in the file name. And then I'll just set this to say have Vidana as the backup. Okay, so there my H1 is changing. I also need to style the smoothies because it's both the smoothies and the H1. So I will go and I can say logo container. So H1 and logo container should have those stylings. Okay, so the next thing I want to work on is this image. It's way too big. So I'm going to just drop that size down. So that's dot logo container image, and I'm going to set that to have a max width of 50 pixels. Yeah, I think that's all right. Sometimes I see students making the logo really big, but it's almost always a very small incidental thing for the user to be able to see the logo. I got a question in the chat, somewhat unrelated, but on last week's MA, there was grade requirements in the delivery. Are we getting graded on the MA, or was it simply for us to see what we would get graded on? So your MA delivery, it won't count towards whether you pass or fail a subject. The MA is there to ensure that you're going to pass the CA. So I strongly suggest that you submit your MAs because it's the only way that we can find out if you're on track to pass the CA. If you make mistakes in the MA and you get a low grade, all that tells us is, oh, this student needs help. And we'll usually say in our feedback, please message me on Discord, or it's a flag for the student to know, oh, hey, I better go and ask a tutor because I'm clearly not understanding this content. If I thought this was a good pass, then there's an imbalance in what's being expected of me and what I'm delivering. So how can I make sure before the CA that I get that corrected? I would say almost everything. I find sometimes students get worried about grades. More important than grades is understanding. It's a vocational school, and so we want you to be good at the vocation, not have gotten 10 out of 10 for a module assignment. So focus on the learning as the primary thing. And that's what we try and do in our grading. The rubric, we try and make the rubric as helpful to seeing what we're focusing on. So for example, if you don't think that responsiveness is important, hopefully the rubric and the weighting of it in the rubric says, oh, this is actually a really important part of HTML and CSS. So yeah, hopefully that answers that. I think I have. Okay, so we've now made that a bit smaller. Let's move on to the header generally. And because it's all displayed in one line like this, I'm going to use display flex. By default, display flex puts all the elements in one line, which is good for me. So it defaults to the flex direction of row. I want to space these out. So here in the example, I have this section at the end, this section in the middle, and this section at the beginning. So what I can do to do that is I use justify content and I set it to space between. Save that. And now you see that my account and checkout is now on the right, the nav's in the middle, and the logo is on the left. I also would like them not to be at the top because it looks a bit weird that the logo kind of forces the header down, but these are at the top of that. So I'm just going to set the line items to center. And you can see now that they're centered inside of that header. It'll probably be a bit easier if I set a background color here. So I'm just going to add a background of this kind of green color. Now the text is unreadable. And a little tip here, if you haven't seen already. So so by default, the color is black. If I look at that, I'm going to struggle to be able to zoom. Oh, there we are. You can actually see that it gives me a comparison of my font color on the background. And here it tells me that it does not meet WCAG standards for accessible text. I'm using Firefox here. That's my personal preference, but Chrome will have the same functionality. So definitely use that if you're unsure if something is or isn't WCAG compliant. I'm going to change these to white. That's what they are there. So what I can do, let me just quickly show something. If I set this color to white, nothing actually happens. And the reason that nothing happens when I apply this color white to the header, because you would expect to, right? I mean, if I put other text in here, so here's my header, let's add some text. So that text all appears white, but the problem is that this is an anchor tag, and by default, the browser is already adding styling for an anchor tag. So you're familiar with the traditional blue underlined text for a link that the browser is adding. So I have to go in and manually change what the browser is doing. So I need to, instead of setting it, well, I can set this color here on the header, but I can also set it specifically on the anchor tags inside of my header. And I'll set that to white. Okay, let me just remove that random text. Okay. So the next thing, I'd like to actually get the smoothies up to the middle here. So I can't remember how exactly I did this before. So now, because I'm not sure how I'm going to code something in styles.css, so I'm unsure, I'm thinking I probably could just use display flex here, but let me test that I can use display flex and get what I'm hoping for out of it, okay? If you aren't using your dev tools regularly, you're going to find development very difficult. So definitely be using your dev tools. So here I'm going to go to this and I'll say add a new rule. So now it's targeting this .logo container. And I'm going to set it to display flex. And I'm going to set the line items center. No, that's not what I wanted. How did I do it? Justify content center. No, that's not what I wanted either. So how did I do it? You know what? I think I did it on the anchor tag itself. So let's try that. So if I set this to display flex, there we go. That's looking better. And I say align items center. There we go. All right. So we don't always know the answer. And sometimes I can't quite visualize it. So I play around in my dev tools until eventually I get it working to how I want it. Okay, so I know now that if I target this anchor tag, I can go ahead and manage the height and the content there. I could also have just placed this anchor tag around the image and then another anchor tag around that text, and maybe someone with a different opinion would want to do that. But let's go ahead with what we just did there. So now I'm going to implement the styling I've just done. So I have this logo container. So I'll say dot logo container a display flex, and I'll say line item center. I also would like it to not have this underline, so I'm going to say that the text decoration should be none. I would also like it to be a bit bigger, so I'm going to say the font size should be, how's 2 rem? That looks better. And maybe we add a bit of padding to this image, or margin. How about some margin? Let's add some 10 pixels of margin around. So that's now just taking it off the edge of the container element there. Okay, so I think that's starting to look like that page there. So I think that's our header complete for desktop at least. Let's move on to the section here. So I can see already that the text is centered. So we have this section here. Let me grab, there's no class applied here, so I'm going to call this class equals, let's call it home intro. Maybe that makes sense. Can't think of a better name for it. Try think of good names for your classes. It makes life much easier. And what you want to try and do when you're naming your classes, 1, keep them lowercase, but 2, try and make them as descriptive as possible. So here, account details. Okay, I understand what that's about. Whereas if you kind of just go like a class like left col, that's much harder, and for like a developer who doesn't live in your brain, for that developer to try and understand where that fits on the page. So it's just much easier to try and describe the page if you can. I mean, the class. Okay, so I've got this account details. Is it account details or account details? I think it should be account details. But this home intro is what I wanted to style now. So first, actually, before I get onto that, I want to set some styles on my main. I want to set a max width of, let's say, 800 pixels. So if I look here, I can see, so there's my 800 pixels. If I look, zoom in. So I can see there's my main. It has a max width of 800 pixels. If I look here on the layout, it tells me there that it's 800 pixels wide. I do have an issue though, because these images are overflowing their container. So I'd need to go and style these. So I can do that. Let's go here. I think that probably we should have a class for these individual products. So I'm going to say class equals, could call it featured product maybe, or featured products dash product. Lets us know that we're inside of another class called products. So maybe what we do is we'll just call this featured and then featured product. That's, there we go. That's neater like that now. Okay, just adding those classes. All right, so I just want to quickly go and say that the featured product image should have a width of 100%. So that featured product image width of 100%. And now you see that the images respond. So here there's a question. We don't need to put the image in a div or figure tag. So the reason you would want to put the image in a div or a figure tag is when you're using Flexbox. On Firefox, it works fine as that an image could be a flex child, but on Chrome, there's problems with it being a child of a flexed element. So what you want is you want a container around that image. Otherwise, Chrome doesn't recognize it as a child of that flexed parent element. So for now, I'm not going to be flexing anything inside of this featured product, so I don't need to place it inside of a figure or a div element. There might be a reason why you'd want to place it inside of a figure element for semantic reasons. You can also add things like a fig caption, but here I'm just really just wanting to have an image on the page rather than like focus any semantic meaning beyond it just being an image. So if I was doing like an article on a blog, say for example, or a news site, and there was say like a image of the people involved in the article, I might really want to kind of semantically focus the attention on the image. And there I have a figure and a fig caption. But here it's just inside of a product. Okay, so now we can see that that's looking a bit better. We have it, this max width. Unfortunately, though, we have this max width weirdly off to the left. So what we can do to fix that is we'll say margin 0 auto. And now it centers it on the page for us. Okay. Goodness, we're 37 minutes in. Okay, I'm gonna have to try and speed up a little bit here. Okay, so, all right. Let me just try and get this out a bit faster because I don't want to use up everyone's time. So here's some styling for the CTA. So I'm going to add some class, add a class to this. So class equals CTA. And there's my styling. I'll just take you through that briefly. So again, focusing on the fact that I've only styled an anchor tag, it still looks like a button, but I've just added a background there. I've added a color, font size, some padding, and I've used margin to place it in the middle of the page. So I've added 30 pixels top and bottom, and then margin auto. So if you set one single margin, so if I had to say margin 30 pixels, like that, that sets 30 pixels top, right, bottom, left. If I set it like that, then that's top and bottom 30 pixels and left and right 0 pixels. And if I had to say something like that, it goes clockwise. So top, right, bottom, left. But if I only want to just set top and bottom margin and I want to center the elements in the page, then I use 30 pixels auto. I'm going to add just a little hover as well, just for fun. Okay, so this wasn't included in my brief here, but I know that I would like just a little change, just a subtle something. You can see it changes it just a little bit on hover there. Okay, now for my H1, I can, okay, it's home intro. So maybe on my other pages, I don't want the H1 to be centered, but on this page I do. So, sorry, I'll say .home intro H1. And actually, before I finish doing that, let's just have a look at that element. So you can see that the H1 stretches all the way from the one margin all the way across to the other. If I had to change this H1 to display inline, you would see there that it only takes up the exact width of the text inside of the H1. But by default, the H1 is a block element. And so it takes up the full width. So therefore, it means that I can go in here and add text, align, and hit center. and it'll now center it in the middle of that block that it is in. Generally, I would suggest that you keep your paragraphs, if you have long paragraphs like this, keep them left aligned is usually a good idea. And the reason for that, maybe let me drop this down to say 600 pixels. And if I had to set, let's set the whole of .home intro, .home intro text align. This is just a bit of design as well. But in terms of the, so users speed read on sites, right? And having different points on the left margin actually slows them down in terms of speed reading, because generally what they do is you start on the left and you bounce into words and you try and see if there's any words that match what you're interested in. But if you do that with text align center on a paragraph, those margin, the points, the lines all start in different places. So here it just allows the user to jump across and in. Personal preference, really. I don't think it's a big problem, but sometimes I can find if there's a long paragraph, it gets very hard to read if each line is starting in a new place. Probably okay with 3 lines, but yeah. Anyway, we'll just keep it like that for now. Okay, so then the next thing I want to do and focus on, I think I've got everything there, is the featured products. So let's have a look at that. So here are my featured products. So it's class of featured. So there's 2 options here. Display grid, and then you say grid template columns, and you could say repeat 1FR. And there I get a 3-column layout. So 3 columns, and they're each taking up 1 fraction, so 1/3. And I could add a gap here, gap of 10 pixels. And that works well for me. I can also show how we might be able to do this using flex. So we'll say display flex. Now it shows them all in 1 row like that. But I don't want them to do that. What I want is a row 3, then a row 3. So what I'm going to do is I'll set the dot featured product, and I will set it to flex 1. That's not all I need to do. So what flex 1 is doing is it's saying that it should add, or basically, flex is you can see here it's made up of flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. But if I set this to flex 1, it basically adds up all the items in the row here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it says that that item should be, so you take basically that this element is 1 out of 6. So it takes 1/6 of the space. And it allows it to expand and contract. So you see here when I hover, it talks about flex grow, flex shrink, and flex basis. So it's talking about how much it grows and shrinks the element to take up the available space. What I can also do here is I can set a min width of, let's say, 260 pixels. And you can see now it's causing a problem. And it's overflowing the space available because I haven't set it to flex wrap. So I'll set flex wrap. Oh, flex wrap. And you can see now, if I look here, you can see that it's actually 266.667 pixels wide. Because I've set it to have a min width of 260. If I had to set this to have a width of 260, I run into some problems because that flex is overtaking it there. But if I just say that I want it to have a min, now it's taking up 260. If I had to drop this to say 250, it should do the same thing. It's just adding that. So now there's a question in the chat. Now, if you shrink the browser on the tablet, the third card will be 100%. So what we can do is I'll show you what happens. Let's open that. And what happens, so you can see the width changing here. So on larger sizes, it's 266.667. And then as soon as I start scaling it, it changes that width. And it drops down. So you can see how it degrades on the different sizes there. That's on tablets, okay, specifically tablets. Let's try an iPad. So on iPad, it's 810 and it's able to take up that space. I mean, if I could set this width to be, say, a min width of, say, 300 pixels, and then it won't have enough space on tablets, so then it'll move to being a 2-col layout. I can add some, let's add some gap here. So gap of 10 pixels. And there's, it's spaced on tablets. You can see it just adjusts to take up and flex to the amount of space. Yeah, I'm not sure what you're hoping to see differently to this. So there it's a single column, then it moves to being a 2-column. If I want it to be smaller than and less than a 2-col, yeah, I don't know what you're wanting here. But there you can see it responds to the width and flexes to the different sizes. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to go back and I'll set it to, say, 250 pixels there. And there it's now able, because the min width is 250, it's now able to scale these up and display 3 on one row and then shrink down on other sizes. Okay, so that's in terms of the responsiveness of this. We've now worked on that. We now need to take a look at the header and deal with the fact that it doesn't look correct. So here is our mobile view. And so what we have is we have the heading here, the H1, then we have a hamburger here. In this case, if you will set another card in the section, you have to change the width. Okay, let's have a look. Yeah, so this works really nicely if I want to know, but I mean, I can also set this then I wouldn't want it to have flex 1. So if it was a concern that I'm not going to have 6 items, I would, so if I'm developing this, I know how many featured products are going to come across onto this page. So I just want the 6 featured products. If I didn't want that, I can go here and we can switch off some styling here. So, so maybe I even want this. If I wanted one bonus featured one, then I can have this styling where it takes up the full width. Otherwise, I can go here and I would set that to not be flex 1. And I guess I could have a width of 250 pixels and then force it down. So there I'd be able to maintain them all at a width of 250 pixels. Cool. So or I could set here as have this as a max width as well, so that it adjusts. Okay. Now let's take a look at the header section here. So I need to move account and checkout down below. So let's work with this in the mobile view. And move that to the side. So I've got this account details here. So I'm going to set some styling on that. And it's also account details. And what I would like the account details to do is I want it to flex 0, 0, 100%. And what that does is it forces it to take up 100% of the width. Now you can see there's a problem there. And again, that problem is caused by flex wrap. So if I go here where I'm setting flex, I can set flex wrap, and it now forces account details down. I changed the background color of that section. So I'm going to change it to a background that, and I'll, if I could try change the color here to be black, but that doesn't work. I need to actually target the anchor tags as spoken about before. So dot account details A. And then let's add some padding here as well. So I'll add some padding of 10 pixels. And you can see there that it's actually not having any effect, my padding. And the reason for that is because these aren't block elements. So what I can do is I can set them to say display inline block. And then now it adds some padding to those anchor tags. All right, so there is that. Just move across. So now they are displayed below. And then I just need a hamburger icon here. So let me get that quickly. So to get that, I need font. Awesome. Just waiting for that to load. Okay, so there's my icon. And I'm going to add that just above this nav here. I'll just have a div here to contain that. And I need to get the, if I go to start, I should be able to, it's a previous kit I've used. And just need to grab script. And now the hamburger is displaying. But what I need to do is I need to create a checkbox here. So I'm going to say that maybe what I could do is I could group this actually together. So let me go here and group. I need to make sure that the checkbox and the nav are siblings. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to create an input type of checkbox. I'll set an ID on it, say hamburger checkbox, and I'll have a label and we'll link them together for hamburger checkbox, and then we just place the hamburger icon inside of there. Empty line. Okay, so now that works. And if I click the hamburger, it works because I've matched the 4 attributes with the ID attribute there. Okay, so now I need to hide and display this nav. So I can go to my styles and let's go under header. So they want the nav to display none by default. I also don't want the what's the ID of it? Hamburger checkbox. I want the hamburger checkbox to display either. And then I'll say that when the hamburger checkbox is checked, the nav should be set to display that isn't working. Why is that? Let's have a look in the HTML. Doesn't want the tilde. Okay, happy with the tilde. Okay. But now I've seen this happen to a few submissions where students have the hamburger icon bouncing around or other elements in the nav suddenly changing because of the nav itself. So what we can do is we can add some styling here. We could say nav, and I want to actually style this. So I'm going to have a class of nav container. And I'm going to set the nav container to position relative. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want to position my nav absolute, but I don't want to position the nav absolute based on the browser window. I want it to be based on its parent element. And so I make sure that I've set the position on the parent element. So now if I set position absolute, let's see what happens. You can see now that it doesn't affect the other pages, and its positioning is based on the position of the nav container. You can see it's taking its position based on that. If I didn't have this, it is actually working fine then if I do that, so that's all right. But always a good idea to make sure that you've set position relative on the parent element. And then I don't want it to go off to the side of my page like that. So I'm going to set a right of 0 pixels. And that's looking better. I'd like there to be some padding here though. So what I can do is I can say that, say this label, maybe we can have some padding on it. So padding of 10 pixels. That looks a bit better. The nav should probably have a background of that green, this green here. And the nav A should have, let's say, padding of 10 pixels. And we can set those to display block. Okay, I don't know if that's exactly how we want things. Maybe this padding could be bigger, 20 pixels. So it's now at least aligned on the page. Okay, but we've now made our styling for mobile, but we actually also need to consider what it's going to look like at desktop. And at the moment it looks like that, which is not how we wanted it to be set up. So we need to go and have a look and work with media queries now. Maybe this was what most people were hoping for, but hopefully this has all been useful information. One thing that is vital, most of you have done this, which is great, and maybe that's just VS Code being good, but make sure that you have your viewports set correctly in your head. If you don't have that, media queries won't work. So please do make sure that you are doing that. So now I'm going to say at media, and I'm going to say that at a min width of, okay, for now I'm just going to choose a fairly arbitrary one. I often get asked what widths to set the media queries, and the answer is whatever looks best for your site. So choose the best option for your site would be my advice. Okay, so the first thing we want our nav to actually be displayed. So we'll have that say display block. I would like it to not be positioned absolute anymore, so I can set it to position static. So now it's not being positioned absolute anymore. I would like the hamburger to go away. So I'll have the, it's actually, sorry, an ID. Right, is it it is a ID. Yeah, hamburger checkbox there. I'm using an ID here for styling, but generally it's better to use class. So I could go and change this and I could add that same class on. So class hamburger checkbox. Maybe that's a better way of styling it. And I'll say that should be displayed now. It's not working. Why is that not working? Oh, it's just the checkbox that I'm actually styling there. That's not helpful. I need the label. So it's the, let's do this. .nav container label. That's what I want to display now. And I want this to come back up. So that is called my account details. So I'll say dot account details. And that I now want to set, instead of having it flex 0, 0, 0, 100%, I would like it to be 0, 1 auto. So 0, 1 auto, that's the default. There was a typo. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the messages there in the chat. Yeah, my bad. Typo. Okay. Cool. So that's now brought the account details section up. I then need to change the background. Set it to none. I don't want a background on that. And I need to set the color. So say account details A, and I'll set that to color of white. But I think that's everything. So we can test it on the site here. So on mobile, the account and checkout is on its own line here. It's pushed out. And then as I scale it up, it then moves back up into this line and displays there. So I think that that's everything. Is there any questions here? Happy to take questions on this. You can just drop them into the chat if there's specific things that you would like covered. In terms of making your own pages responsive, try and break them down logically. Don't worry if there's a section like this account checkout, which on mobile looks different to how it looks on desktop. Think about it semantically rather than how you want it to be styled. There's always ways of changing the styling of the site, but there's only one way to write it semantically that makes sense, generally. Are there any other questions? Happy to discuss things. I can show other things in media queries if you want. I'm not sure what people are struggling with specifically in media queries, so I'm happy to discuss those. While I wait for questions, I'll give it another minute or two. But work in your dev tools. So I work in Firefox here. One of the advantages of Firefox. Yeah, maybe we could do that offline, or I can try, you know what, why don't we try and do it live? I'll see if I can help you. If I can't, then I'll show you at least how I debug things. So we can do that quick, sure. So if you don't want, you can drop it in the chat and I'll see if I can debug it live. Hey, what could go wrong? Debugging live. Okay. Just note here, I see it says rainy days homepage. Please be committing the code to that repo that you created in WCT Web and Communications Technology, but that's on a side point there. Maybe this is being done because you're concerned about it being graded at the moment. When I edit the media, the page does not return to normal when I zoom in on the page and remains in the mobile design. So it's, in terms of that, it's important to make sure that you're coding in one direction, so that you code from mobile to desktop. You can also do the other way, although it is less encouraged. But in terms of the media query flow, make sure that you're going either from big to small or small to big, and that they're all working in the same direction. There's another question. Quickly, I'll take that one and then I'll work on this debugging quick. If you wanted to change the order of the header, for example, hamburger menu left, logo right on mobile, do you need to make a new nav for that and just toggle display none on different resolutions, or can you style that as one nav? You should definitely be styling that as one nav. Again, think about a visually impaired person. So if a visually impaired person had a page read out to them, it would be very weird to hear the same content duplicated. So I'll quickly show you what happens here. Okay, so we have this. What I could do is, because I'm using Flexbox, and I want the hamburger on that side and the logo on the other, I could come here. So, and it is logo container. Dot logo container. I could just change the order. And what's the nav container? There we go, the other one. So dot nav container order 1. And account details over here, I can set that to order 3. Yeah, the screen reader will read out something that is display none. It's not looking at the styling. And the same thing happens for a bot, right? So Google wants to troll through your website and understand the content of your website. So it's going to look at the links. And what it does is that it has what you could imagine is juice. That's how it was explained to me. And it pours the juice in at the top of the page. And it goes through all of the links. And each link, it adds a bit of extra, it divides all the juice up amongst the site. And so what you don't want is you don't want to have juice going into the same page. Google won't like that the juice ends up in the same place. So it won't like that duplication. Okay, so let's look at the debugging here quickly. Okay, I've got it here. It's open in Visual Studio Code. Collection page. Okay, all right, it's telling me that probably I'm running too many different things. So I'm just going to switch off my video for now. Hopefully that keeps things all right. The collections page. Is it this page? Sorry, which is the collection page? I've got index, shop. Okay. Let me look in the index here.
Can you hear me, MJ?
Yeah, there, I can hear you now. Main
Yeah,
collection.
it's on the home page, the collection section.
Yeah, so this one here.
No, the above. Just go above. The first
There
three
we are.
cards. Yeah, the pleasant, the first three cards.
Yeah.
Above that. Above that. Yeah, there. Pleasant, confident, and affordable. These three cards.
And the issue is that.
Yeah, when I shrink my browser, the first two cards stay as normal on the tablet, not like this. Like there, you see? And the third one goes 100%, and I don't want that. I want to follow the same pattern like the first two.
So I think that would be
Without doing any media queries. Or,
not Flex 01 auto there. I think that's right.
yeah, come on. I've been hours trying to do this.
All right. Yeah, they just hit the Flex 0 there.
Yeah, it's getting me crazy, this Flexbox. You know, I spent literally 2 days trying to learn it and how to achieve this stuff without doing any media queries, right? Because I don't want to use any widgets on it, because if I come back later and add another card or delete another card, I don't want to change the code either, right? So I was thinking just to, because I don't mind if it's like this actually.
Okay, cool.
Because now at least I know how to do the rest of them.
All right, cool.
But in the HTML, do you think I use too many divs and stuff? Because I just tried my best to arrange stuff properly, you know. So sometimes I have, because I see you guys don't. I know that you don't like too many divs, but in a situation that I really want to style stuff different, you know. If it's okay to use divs like in like I have a section, and inside I have, you know, maybe 2-3 blocks, like div blocks, right? Like if you see there.
Yeah, I think that's fine. That looks like a fair amount of div usage. We try and encourage students to think as semantically as possible, but sometimes a div is just the right thing to use. And so that's fine. We used to only really use divs and tables until HTML5. The main concern is just students going and writing div class equals header like that, right? That's a problem, where there is actually a valid element that would make sense there. So then rather use as you have there.
Actually, this assignment that we just had now, it's for me actually styling this homepage is just to try things out, right? Because I'm trying to start actually designing and coding the entire website. So at least I can have some reference, right? Because I've been wasting too much time trying to do things proper, right? So, but this video definitely helps a lot, at least to do the navigation. And down in the footer, I'm trying to make it as a grid. So right now it's hidden because it was overflowing a lot on smaller screens. So I just hide it to focus on the other sections. But I would rather do the footer with the grid approach. So on that one, I will have to work a lot, I guess.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds great. And yeah, it definitely makes sense to try and if certain sections are causing problems, sometimes you can even just take them completely out of the code you're working in. I use CodePen quite a lot, and it's just nice to be able to have somewhere outside of the rest of the project to be able to work on a section. So you might find that's helpful.
If you one more thing, if you go on the style page, I wrote this this CSS there up there. Yeah, I wrote this box border up, and now you see in the HTML I put all the variables, but I saw that I should probably use the root instead of HTML.
It's not a huge problem. This is just setting the elements. You can use both. The root is just kind of, it's make sure that it's everything. In case there's ever an element outside of the HTML, but it's fine if you use the HTML here. I don't mind that.
I was reading that it's better to use the root for later on for JavaScript instead of using the HTML. So that's why I'm just asking. But I guess I'll figure it out later in the course.
Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, so there's just one more question here in the chat. I think I have a problem with my footer too. I thought margin top auto would fix it, but it doesn't. I find it hard to stick it to the bottom. What are things we have to think about to make it work properly? So there's kind of two main ways to have a footer forced to the bottom. And the one is with grids and the other one is with Flexbox. I can show those two examples. So if we have a header, main, and a footer. I have my footer outside my grids. Okay, so maybe you've already figured out the problem there, but I'll just quickly finish this. So now what you can do, so I have header, main, footer. I can set the body to have a min height of 100 VH. So that's viewport height. I can set this to display grid, and I'll set the grid template columns to be auto 1FR auto. Not columns, sorry, rows. And there you can see the footer. It's slightly weird because of the way the CodePen works, but there you can see the header at the top, then the main takes up all the rest of the available space inside of the viewport, and then footer at the bottom. You can do the same thing with flex and flex direction column, and then the main flex, and it is 100%. Oh, I can never remember. Yeah, there we are. That's fine. There it works. Cool. I hope that has helped everyone. I can take a look at that question if you want me to. It seems like you fixed it. So if that's sorted now, then all good. But otherwise, you can DM me after the call. Cool, guys. I will share the video session for at the end of this. I think that was good, hopefully. And yeah, let me know how you're getting on. As you work now, do bear in mind the fact that for the CA, you are going to deliver the whole site. So do plan that into your head that over the next week and a half, at the end of this, you should deliver the site. Usually, once you've got the homepage set up, it's just this, dealing with the main section that is the next port of call. A question in the chat, can we have more of these lessons? Yes, would be my desire. The slight difficulty in that is that we have to get marking out as well. So now I've not spent 3 hours on marking, or 2 hours. So I'm behind now on my marking allocation, but I do want to have more of these sessions, and I do think that they are useful.
MJ, just a quick thing. Me personally, I really appreciate this kind of help, because I can tell you for sure, I spent 10 hours on the computer trying to figure it out stuff on my own, and from the lessons we've learned. But you covered in 1 hour a lot of stuff that we just, spent so many hours trying to find out. And I'm not saying that it's not good, because it helps us too, of course, the research and everything. But we have lives too, so it's a little bit too much sometimes. Like, I literally had no weekend. So I'm not saying this to complain. It's just that if you guys can figure it out, something that can help us throughout our projects, because it's a lot of help. You covered in 1 hour what I did in 30. So it's a lot of help, especially for me. I don't know the rest, but I guess they will appreciate that too. I guess if you just make a video once a week or twice a week or once in 2 weeks or whatever, considering the module that we're in.
Yeah.
If it's coding, at least. That's all. Thanks a lot.
No, that's great feedback, guys. We want the course to work as well for everyone as possible. So that's great feedback. Don't feel nervous to share something like that. I'm glad it was useful then, and I'm glad to be able to help and show. My DMs are always open. Like you say, it's good practice to learn and struggle a little bit, but yeah, we don't want your lives to be upside down, especially if there's something where I can help with a small bit of the learning process. So yeah. There's one last question. Yeah, sure thing. Yes. So in terms of the statuses of Discord is the question. So the teachers set themselves online and offline, and on DND. So I will usually put myself on DND if I'm in a call. So I might be in a call with another class, or I might be in a call with someone in the administration. And so I'm literally not able to chat. So that's when I'll usually set myself to DND. We try to follow the 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Guideline, although we don't always do that in terms of tutoring, just because we have to get marking out. And so the amount of time that I would like to give all of you students in terms of your marking, I just have to balance the amount of tutoring that I'm also doing as well. So I try and find that balance in the D&D. What I don't usually mind is I like students to message me, whether that's after hours, and then they just understand that I will message them when I'm next available. So I don't mind if you jump into a chat, but if I have marked myself D&D, it's usually because I'm in a video call. But once I'm finished with that, then I'm happy to come and take a look. And if, yeah, so hopefully that kind of gives a fair account. I sometimes get added any teachers available, but usually I will be already marked myself as online, and then you can just message straight away anyway. No need to ask. Okay, great. Well, I'm glad that was helpful, and I'm glad to hear the feedback that you want more of these. So hopefully we can do that and add that into our process. Right, have a good evening, everyone. Chat soon. Okay, keep well. Bye.